"You'll never graduate from this school." My dad laughed, until I proved him wrong. My father's laugh is something I'll never forget. It wasn't warm. It wasn't the kind of laugh that filled a room with light. It was sharp and short, the kind that was designed to cut. And the last time I heard it directed at me, we were standing in the driveway of the house I grew up in, the summer before my senior year of high school, and he said, "You'll never graduate from that school. You're not smart enough. You never were." He said it like it was a fact, like he was telling me the sky was blue. My name is Maya. I was 17 years old that summer. And I'm here to tell you exactly what happened next, because my father was right about one thing. I didn't graduate from that school the way he expected. I graduated far better than he ever imagined possible. And I made sure he had a front row seat to every second of it. This is the story of how the man who was supposed to believe in me most became the reason I fought the hardest. And how the day I walked across that stage became the greatest revenge I never planned. To understand what that moment in the driveway meant, you have to understand my family. My father, Richard, was a man who had a very specific vision of what success looked like, and it looked exactly like my older brother, Derek. Derek was tall, athletic, charming, and academically average at best. But Derek was a boy, and that somehow made everything he did worth celebrating. Derek got CS, and my father called him well-rounded. I got BS, and my father asked why I hadn't gotten As. Derek quit the baseball team halfway through the season, and my father said, the coach didn't deserve him anyway. I stayed on the honor roll 3 semesters straight, and my father said, good, don't get cocky. My mother, Linda, was what I'd call a quiet enabler. She wasn't cruel the way my father was cruel. She just never pushed back. She had this nervous, appeasing energy, always smoothing things over, always saying, that's just how your father is, as if the way he was somehow explained away the damage he did. She loved us, I believe that. But her love had a limit, and that limit was her own comfort. Then there was me, the second child, the daughter, the one who apparently needed to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I was 12 the first time I really understood what I was dealing with. I'd won a regional writing competition, a big deal, the kind of thing that came with a certificate and a small scholarship fund for college. I came home holding the paper with both hands, heart pounding, absolutely certain that this would be the moment my father looked at me with pride. He glanced at it, nodded once, and said, Derek got picked for travel soccer. That was it. Not congratulations. Not good job. Derek got picked for travel soccer. I went to my room and put the certificate in a folder at the bottom of my desk drawer. I didn't show it to anyone after that, but I kept it. Something in me already knew, you keep your evidence. You never know when you'll need it. By high school, the pattern was so deeply established that I'd almost accepted it as normal. Almost. I was a strong student, curious, driven, stubborn in the way that teachers either love or dread. I tested into the advanced academic program at Westfield Academy, a highly competitive magnet school about 40 minutes from our house. It required an entrance exam, a portfolio, and a teacher recommendation. I'd done all of it on my own. My father had no idea I'd even applied until the acceptance letter arrived. His response? That's too far. You're going to Jefferson like Derek did. Derek had barely graduated from Jefferson. I didn't say that. I just looked at my mother, who looked at her hands. I earned this, I said quietly. You're 16 years old, he said. You didn't earn anything. My mother negotiated a compromise. I could go to Westfield, but I had to arrange my own transportation. I'd have to get up at 5:45 every morning and take 2 buses. My father made it clear he would not be driving me, ever, under any circumstances. This was, I think, his way of setting me up to fail. If I couldn't manage it, he'd been right all along. I got up at 5:45 every morning. I took 2 buses. For 2 years, I never once asked him for a ride. Junior year was when things started getting actively worse. Westfield was intense. Brilliant kids, high expectations, a college prep culture that was simultaneously inspiring and exhausting. I was holding a 3.8 GPA, working part-time at a coffee shop on weekends to cover my school supply costs because my father refused to contribute to a school he hadn't chosen, and still managing to be present for my mother, who I could see was growing more fragile and more silent by the year. The first major incident happened in October of junior year. There was a college information night at Westfield, a huge event where university representatives came to speak with families. I'd been looking forward to it for months. Asked my father 3 weeks in advance if he'd come. He laughed. Not a mean laugh that time. Almost a fond one. College information night, he repeated, like I'd said something adorable.
Maya.
You're going to community college, maybe. Let's be realistic. I have a 3.8 GPA, I said. You have a 3.8 GPA at a school you chose, he said. Nobody's going to care about that school's grades. It's not like it's a real school. I went to the information night alone. A woman from the University of Michigan handed me a brochure and told me I was exactly the kind of student they wanted. I folded that brochure and put it in my bag and thought about my father sitting at home watching television. The second incident came in February. I'd applied for a competitive summer research internship at a university lab, the kind of opportunity that required a faculty recommendation and a written proposal. I'd spent weeks on the application. When I told my mother about it, she accidentally mentioned it at dinner. My father looked at me across the table. They won't pick you, he said simply. Those spots go to kids with connections. We don't have connections. I just need to be qualified, I said. You're not, he said. And he went back to his food. I got the internship. I found out via email on a Thursday afternoon, standing at a bus stop in the rain. I cried, not from happiness, not exactly. From something more complicated than happiness. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell anyone at home. I just quietly rearranged my work schedule and started that June. The third incident, the one that should have been my breaking point but wasn't, not quite yet, happened at Christmas. I'd been saving money for my job and had put together a small college fund of my own. It wasn't much, about $1,400, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. My father somehow found out about it, I think through my mother, and at Christmas dinner he announced that since I was being so independent, the money they'd nominally set aside for education expenses, which I later learned was less than $2,000, would be going to Derek instead, to help pay for the online business course he decided to take. Derek, who at 22 was still living at home, still borrowing my father's car, still talking about the app he was developing. I looked at my plate. I felt something harden in my chest. Not anger exactly. Resolve. Save that feeling, I told myself. You're going to need it. The summer before senior year. The driveway. The laugh. Here's the full story of what happened that day. I had come home from my internship with news. Real news. The faculty supervisor at the university lab, Dr. Patricia Osei, a woman I had grown to deeply respect, had pulled me aside that afternoon and told me that based on my work over the summer, she wanted to write me a strong recommendation for early decision applications. She'd told me, specifically, that she believed I was a viable candidate for some of the best research universities in the country. I drove home. I had my license by then, and a beat-up Honda I'd bought myself, with that feeling in my chest like sunrise. Like the whole world had just cracked open and shown me the light inside. I walked into the house. My father was in the kitchen. I told him what Dr. Osei had said. I told him about the recommendation, about the universities, about the plan. He listened. He actually listened, which surprised me. And then he smiled, that cut-glass smile, and he said, Maya, come outside with me for a second. We walked to the driveway. He leaned against his truck. He crossed his arms. And he said, with complete, unhurried calm, You'll never graduate from that school. Let me tell you why. You don't have what it takes. You're smart enough to get in places, I'll give you that, but you don't finish things. You never have. And when it gets hard, which it will, you'll crumble just like your mother does. You're exactly like her. Then he laughed. Short, sharp, dismissive. I stood very still. I thought about the certificate at the bottom of my drawer. I thought about the bus at 5:45 in the morning. I thought about the Christmas dinner and the $1,400 and the brochure from the University of Michigan and the internship I'd gotten in the rain at a bus stop. I thought about every moment I had stood in that house and been told I was less than I was. And something in me didn't break. It didn't crumble. It crystallized. Okay, Dad, I said. and I walked back inside. That was the last time I asked my father for anything. What my father didn't know, what I had never told him, never told anyone in that house, was that I had been building something quietly for almost 2 years. Dr. Osei wasn't the only person at that university who knew my name. Through the internship, I had connected with a graduate student named Priya, who became something like an older sister to me. Priya had grown up poor, first-generation college student, no family support, and she had made it to a PhD program through sheer focused effort. She was the first person who ever looked at my situation and said, without softening it, "Your family is not going to help you. So stop waiting for them to." That sounds brutal. It was actually the most freeing thing anyone had ever said to me. Priya helped me understand the financial aid system in a way my school's guidance counselor never had. She helped me understand that as a student with a low household contribution relative to income because my father, despite his posturing, did not make a lot of money, I was potentially eligible for very significant need-based aid at elite universities. Universities that my father had dismissed as fantasy. I spent senior year in a state of quiet, intense focus that probably looked like withdrawal to anyone watching. I took my SATs and scored in the 97th percentile. I stayed on the honor roll. I wrote college essays that were honest, painfully precisely honest about what my life had been and what I intended it to become. Dr. Osei wrote me the recommendation she'd promised. My AP literature teacher, Mr. Cardenas, wrote another. My internship supervisor wrote a third. I applied to 11 universities. My father thought I was applying to 2 community colleges. I did not correct him. I checked the mailbox every day before he was awake. I set up a separate email address for application correspondence. I was meticulous and careful and completely invisible about all of it. And then, in late March of my senior year, on a Tuesday morning when the house was still quiet and my father was still asleep, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I'd made myself, and I got in. Full scholarship. Room, board, and tuition. One of the top research universities in the country. I put my hand over my mouth. I didn't make a sound. I just sat there in the quiet kitchen with tears running down my face, completely alone, and I thought, I did this. I did all of this by myself. And then I thought, now comes the part I've been waiting for. I didn't tell my family immediately. I held it for 2 weeks, which was its own kind of power, knowing something that would change everything and choosing exactly when to release it. In those 2 weeks, I did several important things. I told Priya, who cried on the phone with me. I told Mr. Cardenas, who stood up from his desk and shook my hand and said, "I have been waiting for this since the day you walked into my classroom." I told Dr. Osei, who sent me a 3-paragraph email that I have printed and kept ever since. I also made some practical arrangements. I researched student housing and early move-in options. I opened my own bank account, separate from the one my parents technically had viewing access to. I quietly began preparing to leave. Not dramatically, not vindicatively, but completely. I was not going to leave a door open for my father to walk back through and diminish this. And I arranged one more thing. My father's sister, my Aunt Carol, who lived 3 states away and who was the only member of his family who had ever treated me like a full human being, she was coming for my graduation. She'd already bought her ticket. I called her and told her what had happened, what I'd gotten, what my father had said in the driveway. She was quiet for a long time. "Does he know yet?" she asked. "No," I said. Another pause. "Maya," she said softly, "I have wanted someone to hand that man a mirror for 40 years. "I know," I said. "I'm going to." My father thought he was attending the commencement ceremony of a student finishing her senior year of high school. Standard stuff. He'd agreed to come, not enthusiastically, but Aunt Carol's presence had pressured him into a minimum of performance. My mother was there in a blue dress, nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Derek hadn't bothered to show up. That surprised no one. What my father did not know was that our principal, Mr. Vance, had invited me to speak. I was one of 2 students selected to give a short address at graduation. I'd written the speech over several weeks. I'd shown it to Priya, to Mr. Cardenas, to Dr. Osei. I had not shown it to anyone in my family. The ceremony was held on the school's main lawn on a June afternoon, all green grass and white folding chairs and parents with cameras. I found my family before the processional. My father had his arms crossed, already looking like he'd rather be somewhere else. My mother squeezed my hand and said I looked beautiful. Aunt Carol hugged me hard and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, baby girl." My father gave me a nod. "Don't be nervous up there," he said, because of course he knew about the speech. The program listed my name. "I'm not nervous," I said. That was true. I had never been less nervous in my life. I won't recite the entire speech here, but I want to tell you the part that mattered. I stood at that podium in my cap and gown, and I looked out at those faces, and I spoke about what it means to build something when no one hands you the materials. I spoke about the 545 bus. I didn't name it as that. I just said, some of us got here by a different route. A longer route. A route that required us to get up before sunrise and trust our own navigation when no one else would. I spoke about the value of a single adult who believes in a young person, and I named Dr. Osei Mr. Cardenas Priya. I watched my father's face as I listed the people who had shaped my future and realized, slowly, that his name was not among them. And then I said, I want to close by sharing something personal. When I was 17, someone I loved very much told me I would never graduate from this school, that I didn't have what it takes, that I would crumble when things got hard. I paused. The lawn was completely silent. I want to say, for the record, I didn't crumble. I'm graduating with a 3.9 GPA. I've been awarded a full scholarship to study biochemistry in the fall, and I start my first semester in September. The audience erupted. I kept my eyes forward. The people who doubt you are not always strangers. Sometimes they're the people sitting in the front row. And the most important thing I can tell you is this: their doubt is not your destiny. Build anyway. Prove it to yourself first. Everything else follows. I stepped back from the podium. The applause was loud and long. And in it, in the noise of all those people celebrating, I finally let myself look at my father. He was not applauding. He was sitting very still, arms no longer crossed, hands flat on his thighs. My mother was wiping her eyes. Aunt Carol was on her feet. My father's face looked like a man who had just been handed that mirror. After the ceremony, when families were milling around taking photos, my father found me near the edge of the lawn. He had a complicated expression, something between pride and shame and a kind of helpless confusion, as if the world had rearranged itself and he hadn't been consulted. "You got a full scholarship?" he said. "Yes," I said. "You didn't tell us." "No," I said. "I didn't." He was quiet. I watched him search for something to say, some way to reframe this, some way to make it mean something different. He said, "I was hard on you because I wanted you to be tough." I looked at him for a long moment. "I am tough, Dad," I said calmly. "I built that entirely without you, so you can take credit for the hardship. But the strength? That's mine." And I walked away to stand with Aunt Carol, who put her arm around me and said nothing at all, because nothing needed to be said. The consequences came not dramatically, but steadily, the way real consequences do. My father did not explode. He did not transform overnight. But the speech traveled. Someone had filmed it on their phone and sent it to family members, as people do. Within 2 weeks, my grandparents on my father's side had called him to ask about it. His own mother, my grandmother, a sharp and unsentimental woman in her 70s, called him directly and said things I was not present for, but that Aunt Carol reported left him very quiet for several days. My mother called me a month after I left for college. She sounded lighter than I had heard her in years. She said she had started seeing a therapist. She said, carefully and with some effort, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you the way I should have." I told her I appreciated that. I told her the door was open, but slowly. We still talk. It's careful and quiet and honest in a way our relationship never was when I lived under that roof. Derek eventually moved out. The business app never materialized, the online course was abandoned, and got a warehouse job an hour away. He and I have a cordial, distant relationship. He texted me congratulations when I got into graduate school 3 years later. I thanked him. That was about all there was to say. My father and I have a complicated non-relationship. He came to my college graduation 4 years later, full ceremony. I graduated with honors and an award in my research department. He sat in the audience and he applauded. After, he shook my hand and said, with real effort, "I was wrong about you." I nodded. I thanked him. I didn't say it's okay, because it isn't entirely, but I didn't need it to be. I had already built my life, without his approval, as a foundation. I'm 26 now. I'm in the second year of my PhD program in biochemistry. I have an advisor, who calls me one of her most promising students. I have a small apartment that I pay for myself, a cat named Cardanus, yes, after my teacher, and a group of friends who feel like chosen family. Priya was a bridesmaid at a mutual friend's wedding last spring. We danced until midnight and drove home with the windows down, laughing, and I thought, this is the life I built on the other side of that driveway. Looking back now, I don't carry a lot of bitterness. I want to be honest about that, it took work. There were nights in college when I'd see other students with their fathers and feel something hollow and sad that I had to just sit with. There is grief in being the child of a parent who couldn't see you. That grief doesn't disappear because you succeed. It just gets smaller, relative to everything else you're building. But here's what I know to be true. The doubt was fuel. My father's laughter in that driveway lit something in me that 1,000 gentle encouragements might not have. I don't recommend it as a parenting strategy, but I am, in some strange and complicated way, grateful for it because it taught me, earlier than most people learn it, that external validation is a house built on sand. The only foundation that holds is the one you pour yourself. If you're someone who's been told you can't by a parent, a sibling, a partner, anyone who is supposed to be in your corner, I want you to hear this. The record is not final until you say it is. Get up. Build your evidence. Keep your certificates. Take the 2 buses. Do the work in the quiet, in the dark, in the rain at the bus stop. And when the moment comes, stand at the podium and speak your truth with your whole chest. Because the most powerful revenge isn't anger. It isn't confrontation. It isn't making someone feel small the way they made you feel small. The most powerful revenge is a life so fully and beautifully lived that their doubt becomes, in the end, the most laughable thing in the room. My father laughed at me in a driveway when I was 17 years old. I graduated. I proved him wrong. And I've never looked back.